Johnny Mac's in the house. We got football in the house as well. The Combine, the draft, free agency, and a trade. It's all part of today's Football at 4 here today on the Sports Bash. Johnny Mac, welcome back. How are you, my man?
Doing well. How are you, Mike?
Always good, my man. And I know that people wonder, man, how do you guys do football every single day? There's too many topics all the time. We never get to them all, so let's get into them, including Tom Brady and the chatter of San Francisco. NBC Sports Boston reporting the chatter about Brady ending up in San Francisco is, quote, real. First off, that would be very intriguing. Garoppolo there. Brady would replace the guy who was on the same team as him. And how much sense and how much are you saying, yeah, this could be real? This does make sense.
Well, the only part that makes sense to me is the fact that obviously Tom grew up a big fan of Joe Montana and the 49ers. So from that standpoint, okay, you might have an attachment to San Francisco. And then from the perspective, obviously, that team just went to the Super Bowl. But you look at that from both sides of the coin in that, you know, I talked a lot throughout the entire playoffs. It was pretty clear that Kyle Shanahan didn't have confidence in Jimmy Garoppolo. So I think that's fair to say by the way they played. Certainly as they got deeper into the playoffs, we're very concerned about him making mistakes and scaled things back. On the other hand, you have to say he made the Super Bowl. I mean, you do have to give him some credit. And he had a good year overall. If you want to go back to the regular season, certainly made some plays. So I go back to what I've been stressing since the beginning. Why, if you're a new organization and any team that's been mentioned, remember Tennessee was the leader in the clubhouse back at the Combine from Jeff Darlington's report because of Mike Vrabel. Now we have San Francisco. Why do you want a 43-year-old quarterback? That part of the equation will never make sense to me. And you know, San Francisco is good. They're going to be good. Is he the type of guy that can get them over the hump? Could they think that type of way? I guess. But, boy, I got to tell you, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're looking at it, it's Garoppolo would come off your books at no cost to the Niners. It would clear, $22 million in cap space. I guess Shanahan would get, a chance to say, hey, I got maybe a 1 or 2 year window. I guess this would basically say that we don't believe in Garoppolo if you're doing this. And you get a 1 or 2 year window.
Yeah, I mean, if you think, you could argue Tom obviously did not play nearly as well, and I think the decline started last season. So you can argue it from 2 points. Did New England just not have enough playmakers? And certainly on paper they didn't. So maybe that was part of the decline. But you also have to put into that the fact that he is 43 and just natural. At some point,
yeah,
we've been saying this for years as well. Father Time is going to beat you, and Tom has held him off as more than most. But I don't see him elevating his physical stature over the next 2 years from a playing standpoint. It's only going to keep declining. So I don't know. But the one part that is inescapably true is that Kyle Shanahan basically screamed to the top of the mountain and said, I don't trust Jimmy Garoppolo. So that part of it makes sense.
Right. So if you're saying, I don't trust this guy, and there's a chance, even if it's for 1 or 2 years, I'm going to take my window because Shanahan, of all guys, being in Atlanta, losing that game, and then losing again last year, knows you don't know how many opportunities you're going to get. If I can get a guy for even just 1 year, why not do it?
Yeah, I guess it has to do with how you look at Tom as a player at this standpoint. Everybody makes the Peyton Manning comparison in going to Denver, but Peyton was a little bit younger. Peyton was still playing at a high level, was the MVP when they lost the Super Bowl, and then actually played pretty poorly when they won the Super Bowl. So there's a lot of other people fighting for that goal. San Francisco obviously has a Super Bowl level roster. They've already proven that. So it comes down to the evaluation. Would you rather have a 43-year-old guy that can handle the stage? All that, there's no question about that. You can trust him as far as handling the offense and doing what he's supposed to do. So all of that is good, but you have to weigh that against how big is the decline, and that comes down to your evaluation. And I've said it from the start. I'm not wavering from it. I don't care if it's the best 43-year-old quarterback of all time, and this certainly is. This is the best quarterback of all time. I don't want a 43-year-old quarterback unless I have to have a 43-year-old quarterback, and that's the New England Patriots.
I'm with you, John. I don't understand why any team that has had success would want Tom Brady right now.
It makes no sense to me. It makes none. It's the sentiment is understandable from New England's standpoint because he's done so much in that organization for that organization, and that organization has had the success. So that makes sense to me. For anybody else, San Francisco, Tennessee, and put anybody else, Chargers, whoever, it makes no sense whatsoever.
Well, what about if
you're making bad decisions?
What if you're San Francisco? Would you say if you don't believe in Garoppolo, then this is an offseason to try to upgrade it because there are options?
Yeah, there's a ton of options. There's a ton of younger options, both.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
If
you're saying you don't believe, and you say he's screaming to the high heavens that he doesn't believe in Garoppolo, is this then the time to say, I got to do something with, I don't know, Jameis Winston's available, Phillip Rivers is available, Tom Brady's available. Get me somebody why I have this window. Nick Foles is available. Get me someone.
Well, some people in San Francisco, it's interesting because there's reports also in San Francisco that the 49ers love Nick Mullins. He's one of their backups. So it goes both ways. You got an unproven guy, although he played pretty well when he had an opportunity for a bad team when Garoppolo was hurt. And then you have the other end of the spectrum, the most proven quarterback of all time, but he's 43 and all that. So it is silly season. You hear everything. But, yeah, I mean, there are guys I've talked about this a lot as well. There are guys out there, and Teddy Bridgewater being a notable example. His agent is spinning numbers like $30 million a year. Well, there's more quarterbacks than chairs if you're playing the game of musical chairs in this offseason. When you put together free agency and the draft, there's a ton of available options. So the 49ers can go in a lot of different directions, and probably the better option for them, not probably, definitely, would be to get a younger quarterback. And maybe they have it in Nick Mullins. Maybe they get later in the draft, or maybe they do say, Jimmy stinks. I don't think they're at that point, but there's a lot of options. You're right.
I feel like Garoppolo had a good year. Like, am I missing something? I understand the rumors.
He had a good regular season.
Yeah, and he obviously, wasn't great in the Super Bowl, as we all know, but
he was really bad. It really harkens back to the divisional round, their first playoff game. Remember, he threw that interception to, I think it was Eric Kendricks, and then, Shanahan totally shut things down from an offensive perspective. He didn't throw the ball at all in the second half, and that's where that whole narrative started in moving into the next week against Green Bay. They didn't throw it at all. They just ran it down Minnesota and Green Bay's throats. And it was pretty impressive to see because they both knew they weren't going to throw the ball, and they still were able to win. And I remember talking about the Super Bowl and how small that margin of error was going to be against Kansas City and that explosive offense. That's tough to win when you're facing a team like Kansas City. And when you get to the Super Bowl, let's face it, your only goal is to win it. And it was always going to be really difficult for Jimmy Garoppolo to match up with that offense. And I think that's where San Francisco is. It's a really good team, but they understand to get over the hump, they need a quarterback that can make plays. And at least in the playoffs, Kyle Shanahan did it himself. Hey, you can say we're haters, whatever term you want to use. Kyle Shanahan is the one who said it by his actions. Forget about words. Look at his actions. Didn't let him throw the ball. Didn't trust him.
You talk about the musical chairs of the quarterback position in this offseason. When is the first domino going to fall? And is that the case? Like, is it just going to be a matter of Tom Brady's going to Tennessee in 2 weeks and then everything else is going to follow? Is that what's happening, you think?
Well, everyone says Tom is the first domino and holding everything up, but I think there's limited options there. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think there's a lot of teams in the market for quarterbacks that have no interest in Tom Brady. They're in a different stratosphere. Tampa Bay would be a notable example. They don't want Tom Brady, so they're trying to decide between Jameis Winston and probably Teddy Bridgewater. And so they're not part of that domino. Free agency doesn't start till March 18th. You have the legal tampering period, which is an oxymoron, that starts a couple days before that. So other than a trade, and that's what happened with A.J. Bouye today at corner, dominoes can't fall yet. So you hear the speculation, but technically you can't negotiate until that legal tampering period.
Right. You just brought up the trade, so we will kind of transition into it. A.J. Bouye goes from the Jaguars in exchange for a 2020 fourth-round pick, and it's kind of like the first domino, it seems like, from that Jacksonville team. Foles, Ngakoue wants to get out of there. Bouye now traded. Now, the league year doesn't come official until March 18th, but Bouye is going to go to the Broncos. And I wonder, John, what that kind of does now for, what that means for maybe a potential pursuit for a guy like Darius Slay. Does that set the market there? What does this trade kind of say about, number one, the corner market, and number two, Jacksonville? God almighty, they seem to be a mess.
Yeah, Jacksonville is pretty clearly ripping it down and trying to rebuild. And who knows, maybe it'll get down to a Miami situation at some point because, you talk about Ngakoue. A.J. Bouye is a very good corner. He's out, and obviously they're going to move on from Nick Foles, although I don't think that's going to have much effect on them. But nonetheless, A.J. makes $13 million a year. He's under contract through 2021. So that's why the Broncos only had to give up a fourth-round pick. That's the reason why. And, that's a guy that probably would have been in the plan B, plan C, plan D conversation for the Eagles if he was on the trade market, if he remained on the trade market. Obviously, Byron Jones being plan A. But I don't think it sets the market that much because when you talk about his value from a salary cap standpoint, he makes so much money, that's going to limit what you can get back in return. And that's what Detroit's dealing with Darius Slay because he not only makes a lot of money to begin with, he wants a renegotiated deal where he wants to be one of the top paid corners in the league. And if you're going to do that, it's going to be very difficult to send a first-round pick as well back and then make him the highest paid corner. And so that's sort of some of the things the Lions are dealing with.
The Eagles have 3 fourth-round picks. Would you have liked to see them make this kind of phone call?
Yeah, it would have been an upgrade, no question about it. I think they're looking in other directions. And sometimes when you're looking in other directions and you have that plan C in your back pocket, when you get to it, if you need to get to it, it's not going to be there because there's 31 other teams making machinations, and that's why that makes it difficult.
Right.
You can't just say to yourself, okay, well, if we don't get Byron Jones, we'll go get James Bradbury. If we don't get them both, let's trade for A.J. Boye. You can say that in the office. Howie can be talking to Andy Weidel about it, but other teams are going to move, and we've seen a move before the new league year. So one guy's off the board.
Yeah, and we've been talking a lot about what the Eagles will do, whether that's Byron Jones or going in the draft and getting a corner or getting a wide receiver or trading for a wide receiver. In your mind, what is the first move that Howie and the Eagles will make if everything is still on the table?
Well, I think the first call they make is to Jones and his agents, and let's be honest, they've already started. That's what the combine is for. Now, that legal tampering period didn't exist, so it's not quite as overt as it once was. Everything used to get done years ago in Indianapolis when all the agents and personnel people would get together, sort of wink-wink deal. So everybody in this league knows the Eagles are going to make a serious pitch. And by the way, that's another part of that deal that is on the positive side for the Eagles. The Broncos were one of those teams that was probably going to be in the mix for Byron Jones. Probably not going to be now because they made this trade for A.J. Boye. They're not going to be in the market for a $13 million cornerback and then a $17 million cornerback on top of it. So that probably takes a team the Eagles would have been competing with out of it for Byron Jones. So that part of it is a positive.
Johnny Mac, John McMullen with us, Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. There's so many intriguing stories out there with this franchise tag coming up as well. And we talked about Jacksonville and Yannick Ngakoue. Is he a guy, that would interest you at all? He's 24. I mean, it would get you a younger guy. You'd probably, it's something that you probably don't think is a huge need for this team. But I don't know, a 24-year-old guy who wants to get out of Jacksonville that you might say, the guy wants out, why don't we make a call? Would he be a guy that would interest you?
Yeah, from a football standpoint, yeah. It's a very, very difficult fit. You cannot, I just talked about Denver, you cannot go get the top tier corner on the market, make Byron Jones the highest paid cornerback, and then, oh, by the way, we're going to get a 24-year-old edge rusher who, by all indications, Jacksonville's going to tag in order to make a trade. And then you start talking about top-of-the-line money at edge rusher, which is exorbitant. Can't do it. So that's like one or the other. If you want Ngakoue, you can't get Jones. If you want Jones, you can't get Ngakoue. And just by the nature of, remember, you're not only going to have to pay him, you're going to have to send significant assets back as well.
Yeah.
And so it's very unlikely the Eagles would be in the Ngakoue business. It's just too expensive.
Yeah, go ahead. I figured that was going to be the case. I just felt like the way Jacksonville, after they made the trade, and then he says, I want to, I've informed them I don't want to be here. They want to trade Foles. It almost seems like, hey, open for business, and if you want to get creative and call us, bring it on.
Well, they're definitely open for business, and they're definitely going to deal him. I don't think there's any question about that, but they're going to want significant assets in return, as you just mentioned, his age, his production, and the position, the value of the position. Everything is positive from their standpoint as far as getting something significant back in return. So that makes it complicated. I think the Eagles are going to be far busier in free agency in the trade market than they have been over the past few years. But I think you only get one big ticket item, and then you start going to the next tier. And that could be very impactful. And everybody goes back to Brandon Brooks, Rodney McLeod, players like that. They weren't, Brandon Brooks didn't set the standard at offensive guard. Rodney McLeod was a lower level at safety. Those are the kind of signings you're going to see. You're not going to see the top corner and the top defensive end and the top safety. It's not possible.
All right, John McMullen, football at 4. Before we let you run, have you slept on Nick Foles and found a way to bring him back?
Yeah, I'm in the Dan Orlovsky camp. Did you see Dan?
I did. I brought it up
today?
because it's bewildering to me. You know, a guy like Tannenbaum ran a organization and has that mindset. It's almost amazing to me that someone had a job in this league. He ran multiple franchises, and his idea was, I got a great idea. Let's pay the backup quarterback $22 million.
Well, and I agree with you, Mike, but I'm going to point out that at times these shows do these things on purpose to create these types of segments.
Well, you know what? If I'm Tannenbaum then, and I had some
I would want to do that.
Right. If I had credibility as a guy who was a GM, and I'm giving my opinion as a guy who was a general manager in the league, I can't give the opinion of, hey, I'm going to sign a backup quarterback for $22 million.
It appeared like he
and
was
by the way,
saying.
I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm saying I hope that's what happened, because if not, I mean, Tannenbaum looks like an idiot.
It felt like, and I'm just figuring out a way to defend him. I don't know why.
No, don't.
Yeah, okay, fine. Never mind. No.
Well, then you have Josina Anderson
Well,
piling
that's what
on.
I was trying to
She had Josina Anderson piling on from the top rope with like an elbow splash.
Yeah,
hey, how about bringing a guy in there that everybody likes? Woohoo!
Rock bottom. She's the queen of the Eagles, stirring the pot drama anyway. But maybe he was saying from Nick Foles' perspective only, like that's the best situation for him.
Well, I think it certainly is. He's never succeeded anywhere else, and he did succeed here on multiple occasions. So I think from his standpoint, I certainly would be the most comfortable. I don't even think Nick would have a problem being the backup quarterback. He didn't have a problem being the backup when he was here. But the issue comes from the Eagles' standpoint, and they don't want, as I said yesterday on the show, they don't want the small vocal minority complaining and asking for the backup quarterback once Carson has a bad game. They don't want it, and they turn the page, and we're not going to see part 3.
All right, John McMullen, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Thanks, John.
All right, thanks, guys.
Yeah, man, he'll be back tomorrow with more football at 4 here on the Sports Bash.